Moon, moonstruck, moonglow, moonlight. A poet said, like a great phantom slowly sweeping through the sky, the moon comes closer to the earth than she should and makes men mad. During the height of the Cold War, we were driven mad to go to the moon by our rivalry with the Soviet Union. We had to get there first, by any means possible, by hook or by crook, or in this case, by what was called a flying bedstead.
A month before we were due to land on the moon, the man who would first set foot on the lunar surface was practicing with this gadget. It was a model of the vehicle that would make the moon landing. His name was Neil Armstrong, and that's a lunar lander trainer. There's a primitive 1969 computer inside, and it's supposed to be flying the lander, not Armstrong. It's dangerous, it's difficult to control. The whole contraption isn't working well. As a matter of fact, it's going to crash. Neil Armstrong has crashed before. He has a reputation for staying with the ship until the very last moment. 1 month later, an emergency like this will happen when he'll be a few thousand feet over the moon. On Earth, he can do something he won't be able to do on the moon. He hits the abort button.
Ready, you gotta go. Got one.
The parachute is close to the fire. Neil Armstrong almost didn't get to the moon. The sky above is measured nightly from the Naval Observatory in Washington. For centuries, the only way to get to the moon was by telescope. We traveled by eyes alone. There was no risk. Then, in the 60s, it was apparent that the rockets carrying nuclear warheads had become so powerful that either we or the Russians would get to the moon. President John Kennedy ordered the United States to send a man to the moon and bring him back safely before the end of that decade. We got there at considerable risk and at great cost. We went to the bright side of the moon in the dark years of the Cold War. And yet, to my mind at least, nothing in this century has excited us more, united us more, than the moon landing. It was not only an American triumph, but the greatest adventure of the 20th century. The story of Apollo 11's voyage to the moon and its three-man crew is one of great risk, risks far greater than were acknowledged then. Tonight, we document that voyage, we look at our country, and we relive the triumph of going to the moon.
July 15th, 1969, Cape Canaveral, the night before the great day. Tawdry and teeming and alive, the Cape was a magnet that night for Americans from all over the country. 3 men were about to go to the moon in a rocket. 3 men atop a 6 million-pound firecracker. A Roman candle for a Roman circus.
The forecast, plenty of sunshine through today with seasonal temperatures. We should reach our normal high of about 82.
Hundreds of reporters were there, of course, from all over the world. But I wasn't one of them. About 40 CBS News camera crews and I paid no professional attention to the moon launch. We were fanning out across the country to take some snapshots, to make a record on the day men were to first land on the moon of the country they had come from, to record a day in the life of the United States. Those notes for history have waited in our archives for 20 years. Tonight, we open that time capsule. We discover that what we recorded were mostly private things. the sound of our voices, the look of our faces, the ordinary way we were back home on Earth on the day 3 of our own were doing extraordinary things in the sky. Back in time, out to space, back to a time when America did things differently.
Morning, July 16th, 1969. Breakfast for the men who were going to the moon. On the left, Mike Collins, astronaut. Brother, nephew, and son of 3 Army generals. He will fly the command module, circle the moon alone many times, while Armstrong and Aldrin land on it. Buzz Aldrin, the most accomplished scientist of the group. Neil Armstrong, former test pilot, commander of the mission. If they got there, they'd be heroes. If they failed, they'd be martyrs.
Right now, our count at 3 hours, 3 minutes and counting, aiming toward the planned liftoff time of 9:32 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. This is launch control.
They knew they were caught in the whirl of history. What they could not know was that their characters would be reshaped by the flight they were about to take. Indeed, a year later, all 3 men had left the space program. NASA had chosen these 3 men for reasons spoken and unspoken. They were all test pilots. All had faced danger many times, and the Apollo program was dangerous. It might even be deadly. NASA was going to leave the microphones open all through the flight. If they died, they'd die in public. That was the unspoken part. What was better known was that there were 6 crews ready. This crew was matched to Apollo 11, and Apollo 11 was the vehicle first ready to fly to the moon. That's how they got the assignment. Not quite by chance, but it could have been 15 other men.
T-minus 3 hours, 4 minutes, 32 seconds and counting. Right on time as far as the astronaut countdown is concerned. The prime crew now departing from their crew quarters here at the Kennedy Space Center. Astronauts Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and then finally Mike Collins, plus their suit technicians and Director of Flight Crew Operations, Deke Slayton, now boarding the transfer van for the trip to the launch pad.
Later, the 3 astronauts would write that success was the priority, not safety. Safety had been sacrificed to the goal of beating the Soviets to the moon. NASA had 4 priorities. The 4th was satisfying man's curiosity about the mystery of the moon. The 3rd was obtaining scientific evidence about the lunar surface. The defense of the United States was the 2nd urgency. But America's prestige in the world was the reason for Apollo 11. Who was first in space was first in the world, 2 presidents had said.
In a matter of 5 minutes or so, we'll be ready for the spacecraft commander, Neil Armstrong, to come across the sill at the 320-foot level. That is our status at 2 hours, 43 minutes, 47 seconds and counting. This is launch control.
The money for space had been hidden in the military budget for years. The cost of the Apollo program alone was $25 billion and 3 dead astronauts in Apollo 1's first practice mission. They had died in a spacecraft just like the one these astronauts are entering.
Here from CBS News Apollo headquarters at Kennedy Space Center, correspondent Walter Cronkite.
Good morning. It's T-minus 1 hour, 29 minutes, and 53 seconds and counting in just an hour and a half. If all goes well, Apollo 11 astronauts Armstrong, Aldrin, and Collins are to lift off from pad 39A out there on the voyage man always has dreamed about. Next stop for them, the moon.
For almost 10 years, the space program had been driving toward this moment. Somehow just seeing this on television wasn't enough. Seats were allocated on a ranking that started with the initials IIP, incredibly important people. The former President of the United States and his wife. The present Vice President of the United States, Spiro Agnew. Then came VIPs, very important people. Last of all, those who stood outside the glass of fame or celebrity. They were known as RAMs, raggedy-assed masses. NASA announced that more than 1 million people were in eyeshot of the launch.
This is Apollo 7 launch control. We're now less than 16 minutes away from the planned liftoff of the Apollo 11 space vehicle. All still going well with the countdown at this time. The vehicle starting to pressurize as far as the propellant tanks are concerned, and all is still go as we monitor.
There was a kind of mad genius to Apollo 11. Since we couldn't get to the moon with a single rocket, this was a collection of rockets. The idea was that each stage would be thrown away as it was used, that the spacecraft would eat itself, so to speak. 5 powerful thrusting rockets were strapped together to get the vehicle off the ground. On the pad, the spacecraft weighed 6 million pounds. When and if the astronauts came back, 99.5% of the original weight would be gone, thrown away in the heavens or thrown back to Earth. A vehicle 36 stories tall would end up as a 10-foot capsule. This is the only section that would make the complete trip.
We're approaching the